Brock Lesnar returns. Not to join Reigns, but to betray him. Warning, Brock Lesnar is back, and he just betrayed Roman Reigns in the most shocking twist in SummerSlam history. Smash that subscribe button now before this moment gets erased from WWE history. The WWE Universe is stunned after Brock Lesnar made his surprise return at SummerSlam, not to confront Roman Reigns, but to align with his greatest enemy, Seth Rollins. No one saw this coming. As Roman Reigns stood victorious after defending his title against Bronson Reed, the arena lights dimmed. The crowd rose. And then, boom, Lesnar's music hit. The Beast stormed the ring, eyes locked on Reigns. But instead of a confrontation, he smiled. Behind him came Seth Rollins, steel chair in hand. The crowd lost it. Lesnar F5'd Reigns so hard the mat shook. Then Rollins stomped his head into the canvas. Together, they stood over the tribal chief as boos and cheers exploded across the arena. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was surgical. Lesnar, once Reigns' fiercest rival, is now Rollins' enforcer. The message? The Shield is being rebuilt, but this time, Rollins is calling the shots. And he's using Reigns' greatest enemy to finish what he started. Paul Heyman watched in horror from ringside. Frozen. Speechless. His past came full circle, because now, both of his former clients have turned on him. Rollins' new faction isn't just dangerous. It's devastating. Featuring Brock Lesnar, Bronson Reed, and Braun Breaker, the group is now calling itself the Black Crown. Their mission? End the Reigns dynasty once and for all. WWE insiders say this twist wasn't planned until days before SummerSlam. But Reigns insisted on doing something no one would see coming. Well, he got it. He just didn't know it would end with Brock Lesnar lifting Seth Rollins' hand in victory. This isn't a feud. This is a power shift. For the first time in years, Roman Reigns looks vulnerable. Can the tribal chief recover from the ultimate betrayal? Is Heyman still in control of anything? And the real question, what made Brock Lesnar switch sides? Sound off in the comments. Smash that like button and subscribe, because the WWE landscape has changed forever. The Beast has broken the bloodline. Subscribe now. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman. That voice once carried empires. But at SummerSlam it failed him. Heyman stood frozen at ringside, eyes wide, mouth parted, as his entire legacy collapsed in less than 60 seconds. Brock Lesnar, his beast, his destroyer, the man he built into a walking apocalypse, returned not to punish Seth Rollins or defend Roman Reigns. He came to betray Roman Reigns. And not just betray him, break him. Reigns had just retained his undisputed WWE Universal Championship in a brutal match against Bronson Reed, surviving the kind of punishment that turns champions into legends. Blood on his chest, fire in his eyes, he held the title above his head as fireworks cracked and cameras flashed. The music cut. The lights dropped. The crowd held its breath. Boom. Lesnar's music hit like a thunderclap. The building erupted, not in cheers, not in boos, but in shock. The kind of shock that makes people forget to hold their phones up. The kind of shock that makes grown men grab strangers by the shoulders and yell, "What is happening?" But what happened next tore reality in half. Brock didn't charge the ring. He walked, slow and deliberate, like a man not in a hurry because he already knew how this ended. Roman Reigns, stunned but still defiant, dropped the title and squared up. But Brock didn't raise his fists. He smiled. Behind him came Seth Rollins, steel chair in hand. Before Reigns could react, Brock hit an F5 that rattled the ropes. Then Rollins, without hesitation, curb-stomped Reigns' head into the canvas. The tribal chief lay motionless. The crowd didn't know how to react, some screamed, others booed, a few cried. But one reaction echoed louder than the rest, Paul Heyman's silence. This isn't just wrestling. This is war. For nearly a decade, Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar have been locked in a mythic battle, two titans colliding at the biggest stages, from WrestleMania to Crown Jewel. Reigns finally tamed the beast in recent years, asserting dominance over WWE with Heyman at his side. But that alliance was never stable. It was business. It was politics. It was survival. And now it's dead. What happened at SummerSlam isn't a heel turn. It's not just another swerve. It's the execution of Roman Reigns' era. It's a message that the WWE power structure has fractured. And at the center of that fracture stands Seth Rollins. The former architect of the Shield has built something new. Something lethal. Something that looks like a resurrection of the past, but with one nightmarish twist. He's replacing Reigns with his worst enemy. Brock Lesnar. What you'll learn in this video. In the next several chapters, we're going deep, not just into what happened at SummerSlam, but why it happened, who orchestrated it, and what it means for the future of WWE. We'll answer questions like, why would Brock Lesnar side with Seth Rollins? Was this Paul Heyman's plan all along, or his ultimate humiliation? Who are the members of Rollins' new faction, the Black Crown? Is this the end of the bloodline, or the beginning of something even darker? What does this mean for WrestleMania, Survivor Series, and beyond? No fluff. No filler. Just the raw, unfiltered truth behind the most shocking betrayal in modern WWE history. WWE is built on moments. Austin's beer truck. Mankind's Hell in a Cell fall. Edge's return at the Royal Rumble. CM Punk's pipe bomb. This might be the biggest moment since all of them. Because this moment didn't just surprise fans. It restructured the future. It changed who holds power in WWE, who fans root for, who the company is built around. Roman Reigns has held the championship for over 1,000 days. He has dominated the main event scene. He unified titles. He stacked legends. He crushed John Cena, Daniel Bryan, Edge, Brock Lesnar, Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes, and more. But now? One F5. One stomp. One silent stare from Paul Heyman. Everything changed. Let's be real, WWE doesn't do anything by accident. And while this betrayal shocked the world, the clues were there all along. Paul Heyman has always been about power, not loyalty. He switched from Lesnar to Reigns in 2020, but the trust was always conditional. Seth Rollins has always seen himself as the overlooked genius of the Shield, the mastermind who never got the same spotlight as Reigns. Brock Lesnar is a mercenary. He doesn't fight for pride or honor. He fights when the money is right, or when revenge is on the table. All three men have been circling each other for years, and SummerSlam 2025 was the perfect storm. The question isn't whether this was inevitable. The question is, why now? Let's not pretend this is just about championships. This is about Paul Heyman. This is about the man who made both Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns world champions. He stood beside both as they crushed every challenger. And now? They've both left him. And worse, they've united without him. The one man who prided himself on always being 2 steps ahead is now caught flat-footed, watching as his kingdom burns. The betrayal isn't just personal. It's surgical. This isn't just a new faction. It's a message: your time is up. Your empire is over. You can argue over who's the GOAT. You can debate match quality and title reigns. But one thing is undeniable: WWE just pulled off its most devastating power move in years. And now, the tribal chief is alone. No bloodline to back him. No advocate to protect him. Just a smoldering ring, a stolen spotlight, and a new faction rising from the ashes of his dynasty. This is the story of the Black Crown. This is the story of betrayal, vengeance, power, and the death of a reign that felt unbreakable. If you're not watching, you're missing the greatest twist WWE has unleashed in a decade. Before the betrayal, before the lights dimmed, before Brock Lesnar returned and flipped WWE on its head, SummerSlam 2025 was already boiling over with pressure, storylines, and dangerous expectations. The build-up to the event wasn't just promotional hype, it was strategic warfare. Every match on the card carried weight, but none more than Roman Reigns defending his undisputed WWE Universal Championship against Bronson Reed. On paper, it looked like another dominant title defense. Reigns had weathered bigger storms before: Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania, Sami Zayn in Montreal, even a last man standing match with Brock Lesnar himself. But this time felt different. This time, there were fractures, not just in the bloodline, but in the aura that had kept Roman untouchable for years. SummerSlam 2025 wasn't supposed to be about betrayal. It was supposed to be about endurance. It was framed as another test of Reigns' physical and psychological supremacy, but behind the scenes, WWE creatives were already working overtime to keep the product from stagnating. The Bloodline saga, while historic, was nearing exhaustion. Ratings were steady but no longer explosive. Merchandise was selling, but storylines felt like echoes of 2022 and 2023. So, they planned something. Something massive. Something that would reset the chessboard. But to understand how that moment came to be, you have to understand the build-up. For weeks before SummerSlam, Bronson Reed had been on a rampage. Not just squashing enhancement talent, but targeting former champions with precise brutality. He decimated Shinsuke Nakamura on Raw. He powerbombed Finn Balor through a steel barricade on SmackDown. He even managed to put Solo Sikoa on the injured list, albeit briefly, setting off alarms in Roman's camp. Reed wasn't just booked as a monster. He was built to look like the one man left who could crack Reigns' armor. Reigns, meanwhile, was dealing with his own house falling apart. The Usos had splintered again. Jimmy was injured. Jay had disappeared after a brutal backstage assault that was never shown fully on camera. Speculation ran wild that it was a hit ordered by Reigns himself, or worse, that it was done by someone else sending a message. Solo was loyal, but not reliable. He was beginning to show signs of independence. Even Paul Heyman seemed more on edge than usual, fumbling his lines, pacing more often during promos, and constantly looking over his shoulder. The WWE Universe started to sense the instability. Roman had always been protected, by his family, by his aura, by the long leash Heyman gave him. But now, he looked like a man who knew something was coming and couldn't stop it. And Bronson Reed wasn't the only threat. There was a ghost hanging over the build-up to SummerSlam, one the commentary team barely dared to mention: Brock Lesnar. He hadn't been seen in WWE programming for over 8 months. His absence was deliberate. No interviews. No sightings. No cryptic social media posts. Just a cold silence that made people nervous. Not even Heyman mentioned his name. And when Heyman doesn't bring up Lesnar, that means something is brewing. Still, all focus remained on Reed versus Reigns. The official narrative was simple: another monster challenger, another tribal chief performance. WWE hyped the match with heavy tribal symbolism. The promos showed Reigns standing tall on mountaintops, shrouded in smoke, surrounded by warriors. Reed's packages, in contrast, emphasized destruction: bulldozers, crumbling arenas, scenes of demolition. But while the marketing painted Reed as the threat, those inside the company knew the real tension was off-screen. 2 days before SummerSlam, Roman Reigns reportedly walked into a creative meeting and made a bold request. He wanted the finish of his match changed. He wanted a moment, something nobody would expect. Sources say he didn't give specifics. He just said one sentence that now feels like prophecy: hit me with something nobody sees coming. That was the spark. In the days leading up to SummerSlam, something shifted. Rollins, who was scheduled for a non-title match earlier in the night, began staying late at production rehearsals. Lesnar's name popped up on internal travel sheets, but was quickly removed. Extra security was hired, not for crowd control, but to mislead the press. Even backstage staff were fed red herrings about potential run-ins from LA Knight or Gunther. Reigns spent the days before SummerSlam not doing media, not rehearsing his match, but watching footage. Not of Bronson Reed, but of Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar. Over and over again. According to someone close to Heyman, Reigns was already suspicious. He felt something was off, not from the outside, but from within. The day of SummerSlam arrived. Detroit's Ford Field was packed to capacity. Over 80,000 fans. A heatwave outside. A pressure cooker inside. The early matches delivered, but the main event was all anyone talked about. When Reigns entered, there was no bloodline. No Sikoa. No Heyman beside him. Just the tribal chief walking alone to the ring. The commentary team spun it as a display of dominance. But in truth, it was an admission. He knew no one was coming to help him. The match with Bronson Reed was a war. Reed threw Reigns like he weighed nothing. At one point, he nearly pinned him clean after a second rope splash. Reigns fought back like a man possessed, hitting multiple Superman punches and a desperate spear that barely did the job. When the bell rang, Reigns didn't look like a champion. He looked like a survivor. He grabbed his title. The music played. He climbed the ropes and held the belt high. The arena, still buzzing, gave him a mixed ovation. Some respect. Some fatigue. Some anticipation. That's when the lights dropped. And the real story began. What WWE did that night wasn't a surprise twist. It was a reset button. But that reset only mattered because the stage was set so precisely. Every match before the main event was placed to disguise the real narrative. Every promo was designed to keep attention on Reed. Every shot of Heyman was choreographed to suggest tension, not treason. But the truth is this: SummerSlam was never about Bronson Reed. It was about ending Roman Reigns. Ending the bloodline era. Ending the narrative that Roman Reigns is untouchable. And it worked. Because when Lesnar's music hit and the betrayal unfolded, it didn't just shock people. It made sense in retrospect. The seeds had been planted, watered, and left to bloom in darkness. Now, we're watching the harvest. SummerSlam wasn't a pay-per-view. It was a coup. Reigns walked in a champion. He walked out a target. And Paul Heyman, the man who once pulled the strings behind Brock Lesnar's destruction and Roman Reigns' dominance, was now staring into the face of a new alliance, one he didn't build. One that didn't need him. It started with a flicker. A split-second cut to black. Nothing more than a moment of silence between victory and aftermath. Roman Reigns had just survived Bronson Reed, and though the match took its toll, he stood triumphant. The camera focused on him, clutching the undisputed WWE Universal title like a lifeline, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. Commentary praised his endurance, his legacy, his reign. Then the screen dimmed. And the crowd felt it before they heard it. Boom. The opening blast of Brock Lesnar's entrance music wasn't just a sound, it was a weapon. The kind that detonates a year's worth of expectations in one breath. 80,000 people erupted at once, their cheers and gasps merging into a single, thunderous roar. Not cheers of joy. Not boos of anger. Just pure, unfiltered shock. It was the pop you can't manufacture. The pop that only comes when your brain hasn't caught up to your eyes. The beast had returned. The ramp lit red. The smoke machines hissed. And from the curtain, Brock Lesnar stepped out in his classic black shorts, gloves on, head down. He didn't bounce. He didn't shadowbox. He just walked. Steady. Like a man on a mission with nothing to prove and no reason to run. Reigns' expression said everything. This wasn't the Lesnar of old. This wasn't Suplex City Lesnar or Cowboy Brock. This was something colder. Something planned. Reigns didn't flinch. He bent his knees slightly, shifting into fight mode. One hand dropped the title. The other clenched into a fist. He was ready for another war. That's what he thought this was. It wasn't. Lesnar circled the ring slowly. The crowd still hadn't quieted. Some people were standing on their chairs. Phones were raised. Security tried in vain to keep fans from rushing the barricades. And then came the most chilling detail: Paul Heyman didn't move. He sat at the commentary table, hands folded, eyes locked on the ring. No shouting. No pleading. No expression. Just frozen. Lesnar stepped onto the ring apron and ducked under the ropes. Reigns stayed grounded, watching every step. The commentary team whispered, Corey Graves stammering, Michael Cole barely able to get the words out. What is he doing here? Is Brock back for revenge? Or is something else going on? And then Brock smiled. It was subtle. Brief. But real. The crowd didn't even get to react before it happened. From behind, Seth Rollins slid into the ring, steel chair in hand. The arena exploded. For a split second, Roman's eyes darted past Lesnar, but it was too late. Rollins brought the chair crashing down on Reigns' spine. Reigns stumbled forward, right into Brock's arms. 1F5. Thunderous. Final. The kind that shakes the ring posts. Rollins tossed the chair aside and hit the ropes. One curb stomp. Then another. No showboating. No posing. Just efficient, merciless execution. Reigns didn't move. The man who had held WWE hostage for over 1,000 days lay face down in the center of the ring. Lesnar didn't gloat. He didn't even flex. He stood beside Rollins. And then, in front of the world, he did something no one expected. He raised Seth Rollins' hand. The Beast. The Architect. Side by side. The camera panned to Paul Heyman, who still hadn't moved. His eyes were glassy. His lips trembled. He looked like a man who had seen his past, present, and future implode in front of him. For the first time in 2 decades, Paul Heyman had no control. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a chess move. The audience was stunned. Some chanted "Holy smoke." Others booed. A few started chanting Rollins' name, while others simply stood with their mouths open, phones forgotten in their hands. Reigns had been conquered. Not in a match. Not in a war. But in a coup. Backstage, chaos erupted. Agents scrambled to react. The commentary team stalled. The replay footage was limited to 1F5 and 1 stomp, WWE clearly trying to recalibrate even as the show aired live. The question on every screen, in every chat room, on every timeline wasn't just why. It was how the hell did this happen? Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins were enemies. Mortal enemies. Their history was violent, personal, unforgettable. From WrestleMania 35 to countless main events, they had torn each other apart. And now, they were allies? No one could process it. Which meant one thing: the plan had worked. The betrayal had been timed perfectly. Not just in execution, but in psychology. No one saw it coming because no one believed it could happen. WWE didn't tease it. No camera angles hinted at it. No backstage segment foreshadowed it. Lesnar didn't say a word. Rollins didn't drop a clue. Heyman never blinked. It wasn't a twist. It was a clean break from the past. Lesnar had returned, but not to seek revenge. He had returned to align. And Rollins wasn't just opportunistic. He was orchestrating. The architect was building again, but this time, his creation wasn't a team. It was a weapon. Together, they weren't just sending a message. They were erasing Roman Reigns. The final visual of the night was Rollins and Lesnar walking up the ramp. Rollins had a calm smirk. Lesnar was unreadable. Neither spoke. Neither looked back. In the ring, Roman Reigns lay still. A pool of sweat and defeat spreading beneath him. The referee didn't check on him. The camera didn't pan back. Because for the first time in years, Reigns wasn't the story. The moment wasn't his. It belonged to Rollins and Lesnar. And by extension, to the future. This wasn't just a return. It was a statement. Brock Lesnar is back. And he just helped bury the bloodline. It wasn't just a moment. It was a dismantling. Calculated. Controlled. Surgical. The betrayal of Roman Reigns at SummerSlam 2025 didn't happen by chance, it happened by design. One of the most dominant champions in WWE history didn't fall in a hard-fought match or a brutal stipulation. He fell in the seconds after victory, blindsided by two of his greatest enemies, in front of the largest crowd of the year, while Paul Heyman stood motionless. What made this betrayal hit so hard wasn't just who turned. It was how they did it. Let's break it down. Roman Reigns had just survived a physical war with Bronson Reed. That wasn't a squash match. That wasn't a walk in the park. That was a grueling test of endurance that pushed him to the limit. He was battered, gassed, and probably concussed. The crowd gave him a respectful reaction, not wild cheers, not deafening boos, just a strange, tense energy. Like they were waiting for something else. Then the music hit. Brock Lesnar. It wasn't the version of Lesnar we've come to expect. No cowboy hat. No bouncing footwork. No pyro synchronized to his entrance. Just a slow, measured walk to the ring. A deliberate presence. That walk told us everything. This wasn't about a return for vengeance. Lesnar had nothing to prove anymore. He'd been beaten by Reigns. WrestleMania. Crown Jewel. SummerSlam the year prior. The rivalry had run its course, or so we thought. Lesnar's presence alone was intimidating. Roman dropped his title, ready to defend himself. That's the mindset he's been trained for. Domination requires paranoia. But what he wasn't trained for, what no one was what came next. Lesnar smiled. Behind him, Seth Rollins entered the ring unnoticed. How? Because everyone was watching Brock. The music, the lighting, the camera angles, everything was designed to distract. Rollins didn't pause. He didn't scream. He didn't showboat. He swung the steel chair. It crashed across Roman's back with a sickening echo. Reigns stumbled forward, pure reflex keeping him on his feet. He turned, only to be caught, instantly, by Brock Lesnar. And Brock didn't hesitate. 1F5. Center of the ring. Impact so heavy the ring visibly jolted. Reigns' body went limp. Seth didn't stop. He hit the ropes and delivered a curb stomp with surgical precision. The kind that doesn't just daze, it erases. The kind that ends matches. The crowd still hadn't reacted in full. There was a delayed fuse. It took them a moment to realize this wasn't an ambush. It was an execution. And no one moved. Not security. Not commentary. Not even the referee. Because this wasn't scripted chaos. It was too perfect. The aftermath was what cemented the betrayal. Lesnar stood up first. Then Rollins. Both looked down at Reigns. There was no shouting. No trash talk. Just silence. Controlled silence. Intentional silence. Then, Rollins extended his hand. And Lesnar raised it. That was the breaking point. That's when fans started booing, not because they hated it, but because they understood what had just happened. The architecture of WWE's last 3 years had just been demolished in 90 seconds. And Paul Heyman? Still frozen. Not in shock. In realization. This wasn't just the end of a match. It was the unraveling of everything he had built. Let's be clear, Roman Reigns' reign didn't survive by luck. It survived because of Heyman. His ability to negotiate backstage, control narratives, protect Roman from politics, he was the insurance policy. And now, both of his former clients were standing without him. That's the twist of the knife. Heyman made Lesnar. Heyman made Reigns. And now, both men have turned on him. This wasn't a heel turn. It wasn't a face turn. It was a power shift. A calculated one. Rollins and Lesnar didn't just attack Roman. They dismantled him at the peak of his power. They did it after a win. After he had just defended his title. After he had earned the right to hold his head high. They didn't take his belt. They took his legacy. Because now, no matter how many days Roman holds that title, no matter how many matches he wins after this, fans will always remember, he was F5D. He was stomped. He was left lying. Not in a match. Not in a rivalry. But in an ambush. That detail matters. Because it changes the mythology of Roman Reigns. For years, he was built as invincible. A tribal warlord. A conqueror. The head of the table. Now? He's human. That's the betrayal. Not just the violence. Not just the alliance. But the deconstruction of the myth. Rollins didn't just get revenge for past Shield betrayals. He made a new Shield. One forged in hatred and silence. Lesnar didn't just come back for chaos. He came back with purpose. And Heyman? He's a relic. Caught in the crossfire of his own ambition. There was no promo. No explanation. No finger-pointing or speeches. Just a quiet, devastating image burned into the minds of everyone watching, Reigns laid out in the center of the ring. Lesnar and Rollins standing above him. Heyman staring at the wreckage. And not one of them said a word. By the time the final shot of SummerSlam faded to black, the question wasn't whether Roman Reigns had been betrayed, it was what had just been born in front of the entire world. Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar hadn't just teamed up for shock value. They weren't some short-term alliance of convenience. What happened in that ring wasn't spontaneous. It was the launch of a new dynasty, and it had a name. The Black Crown. It didn't appear on the broadcast. There was no official reveal that night. But within hours, rumors were spreading. Leaks. Trademark filings. Production sheets. Merch concepts. And by Monday Night Raw, the name was spoken for the first time on air. Seth Rollins, standing in the center of the ring in a black leather coat, microphone in hand, welcomed everyone to the new era. The Shield died for this. Those were his first words. He didn't explain the alliance. He didn't offer an apology. He didn't scream, laugh, or burn it down. He looked straight into the camera and declared war. We are not a team. We are not a family. We are a crown. And this kingdom doesn't belong to the bloodline anymore. The commentary team tried to fill in the gaps. Corey Graves speculated that Rollins had been planning this for months. Michael Cole kept glancing toward the commentary desk where Heyman used to sit. But none of it mattered. The tone was set. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a statement of succession. The Shield was Roman's origin story. It was the launch pad for all three men, Reigns, Rollins, and Ambrose. When it imploded, Rollins took the heat, Reigns took the spotlight, and Dean Ambrose left the building entirely. But now, Rollins wasn't looking to rebuild what they lost. He was looking to reclaim what was taken. The Black Crown wasn't a tribute to the Shield. It was a dark evolution. And Rollins had stacked it with monsters. The next week on SmackDown, Bronson Reed appeared in the main event, not as a babyface avenging his SummerSlam loss, but as an enforcer. He bulldozed through Matt Riddle, barely breaking a sweat. After the match, Rollins came to the ring again. This time with Lesnar. And when he announced Reed as the Hammer of the Crown, the message was clear. Reed wasn't a one-off opponent. He was part of the plan all along. Then came Braun Breaker. He'd been bubbling in NXT and quietly building buzz on the main roster for months, but never given the push many felt he deserved. That changed instantly. On Raw, Rollins introduced him with a handshake and a match. Breakker destroyed Chad Gable in under 3 minutes. Lesnar watched from the ramp. Rollins called it an offering. With Breakker and Reed standing on either side, and Lesnar looming behind, Rollins spoke the words that WWE fans would be quoting for weeks. A throne can't stand on loyalty. It stands on force. Reigns built his table. I built a siege tower. And just like that, the Black Crown became official. The group had no music yet. No logo. No merch. That was intentional. It wasn't about selling shirts or pushing slogans. It was about erasing the illusion of stability in WWE. The Crown had 4 distinct roles: Rollins, the architect, strategist, spokesperson. The mind behind the mission. Lesnar, the legend, the enforcer, the nuclear weapon. Reed, the hammer, the wall of muscle, the constant physical threat. Breakker, the future, the prodigy, the wild card. No jokes. No dances. No catchphrases. Just destruction. What made the formation terrifying wasn't just the talent, it was the clarity of purpose. They weren't chasing titles, at least not initially. They weren't interrupting matches for heat. They were cutting down every thread of the bloodline. The Black Crown wasn't fighting for belts. They were fighting for control. Backstage, reports surfaced of Triple H giving Rollins full character control for the angle. Sources claimed that this was the first time in years WWE allowed a faction to form organically without heavy scripting. The only rule? Shock the system. Every time the Black Crown showed up, something broke. A body. A legacy. A belief. Fans didn't know how to feel. Lesnar, once booed relentlessly, now received a mix of awe and fear. Reed and Breakker gained a new aura overnight. And Rollins, who had been cheered as a fan favorite for over a year, was suddenly the most dangerous mind in wrestling. Not because he turned on Roman, but because he outplayed him. The formation of the Black Crown proved one thing: Roman Reigns didn't lose a match. He lost the narrative. That's worse. Because a title reign can be broken by a pinfall. But a narrative? That's taken by force. And Rollins just took it. Paul Heyman didn't take a bump. He didn't say a word. But when the Black Crown formed and Roman Reigns was left unconscious in the middle of the ring, it was Heyman who suffered the most devastating blow of all. Because the betrayal wasn't just of Roman. It was a betrayal of Heyman's legacy. For over 3 decades, Paul Heyman has shaped the course of professional wrestling from behind the curtain. He created ECW. He masterminded the rise of Brock Lesnar. He refined the bloodline story. And most recently, he helped Roman Reigns become the most dominant champion of the modern era. But when Rollins raised Lesnar's hand, and the screen cut to Heyman staring blankly from ringside, everything flipped. He didn't just look stunned, he looked obsolete. That moment, the silence, the lack of reaction, the paralysis, said more than any promo could. Heyman was no longer in control. To understand how crushing this moment truly was, you have to understand what Heyman represented. He wasn't just a manager. He was the strategic backbone of every empire he touched. He didn't stand beside champions. He built them. He wasn't a hype man. He was a tactician. A chess player. A puppet master. And now? The board had flipped. The players had revolted. And the puppet strings were being cut. The dual betrayal by Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins struck at the very core of Heyman's story. These weren't random superstars. They were Heyman guys. Lesnar was molded by Heyman from day one. Rollins was once seen as a future advocate candidate, intelligent, calculating, gifted on the mic and in the ring. Both men had been guided, at one point or another, by Heyman's fingerprints. And yet, they didn't invite him into this. They excluded him. That was the message. That Heyman, once the man with all the plans, wasn't needed anymore. Not by Brock. Not by Roman. Not by anyone. And that kind of rejection hits deeper than any physical attack. On Raw following SummerSlam, Heyman was nowhere to be seen. Not backstage. Not in the ring. Not even in passing shots. WWE social media team didn't include him in the highlight reels. His name wasn't mentioned in commentary. His absence was loud. The silence around Heyman created an eerie tension, because fans knew that if Paul E wasn't talking, something was wrong. It wasn't until SmackDown that Heyman reappeared. But when he did, it wasn't the smug, confident wise man at the side of the tribal chief. It was a broken man, walking slowly to the ring, microphone in hand, visibly shaken. And when he spoke, his voice cracked. I didn't see it coming. That was all he said. Then he dropped the mic and left. For a man who built his entire career on knowing more than anyone else in the room, that admission was devastating. Because in that one sentence, Heyman admitted the truth. He was no longer the smartest man in WWE. He got played. Not just by Rollins. Not just by Lesnar. But by the same ambition he once used to stay at the top. This wasn't the first time Paul Heyman had been burned. He's been betrayed before. CM Punk turned on him. The Authority humiliated him. Vince McMahon chewed him up more than once. But what made this different was the scale. This wasn't just about personal embarrassment. It was about total collapse. Because Paul Heyman wasn't just part of Roman's success. He was the glue that held the bloodline together. Now, the bloodline is fractured. The head of the table is isolated. And Heyman? He's the man who backed both the Beast and the tribal chief, only to watch them both walk away. The locker room whispers started almost immediately. Did Heyman know? Was he in on it? Or was he being punished? Some say Triple H wanted to phase Heyman out quietly. Others insist this was Roman's idea. A way to create a redemption arc. But the truth is simpler, and more brutal. Heyman got caught in a story he couldn't control. The rise of the Black Crown wasn't part of his blueprint. It wasn't sanctioned by the wise man. It wasn't something he brokered. It was a revolution. And he was in the way. The poetic cruelty is hard to ignore. Paul Heyman built his reputation on betrayal. He turned on his own company in ECW. He aligned with heels for decades. He played both sides with Reigns and Lesnar for years. Now, for once, he wasn't the one betraying. He was the one betrayed. There's no greater irony. And for the first time in his career, Paul Heyman isn't behind the curtain or at the center of the storm. He's watching from the outside. In silence. Brock Lesnar doesn't care about loyalty. He doesn't play politics. He doesn't talk. He destroys. That's been his brand since day one, a wrecking ball with no emotion, no strategy, just power. But at SummerSlam 2025, Lesnar didn't return to conquer. He returned with purpose. And that's what scared everyone. Because when Brock Lesnar shows up with a plan, it means someone is about to be ruined. So, the question that echoed around the WWE Universe after the F5 on Roman Reigns wasn't just what just happened. It was why. Why would Brock Lesnar, a man who spent the better part of a decade trying to destroy Seth Rollins, suddenly raise his hand in alliance? Why would he side with the same man who cashed in on him at WrestleMania 31? The same man who mocked him, fought him, survived him? Why now? There are 3 answers. And all of them are true. First, Brock Lesnar never forgot. Seth Rollins has beaten Brock Lesnar on the biggest stages. WrestleMania 35. SummerSlam 2019. Clean, in the middle of the ring. Twice. Few superstars can say that. And while Brock doesn't operate like a traditional character, there's one thing he holds on to: humiliation. He doesn't forget who pinned him. But Brock Lesnar also doesn't retaliate on the WWE schedule. He doesn't run out on cue. He waits. He chooses his moments. He leaves when he wants, and returns when the stakes are worth it. And this time, the stakes weren't revenge. They were control. Because the second reason Brock turned was Roman Reigns. Not just because of their rivalry. Not just because Reigns stacked him at WrestleMania 37. But because Brock Lesnar, deep down, resents Roman for something few acknowledge: he took his advocate. When Heyman turned on Lesnar in late 2021 to align with Roman, it marked the end of an era. Heyman wasn't just Brock's mouthpiece. He was the only person in the world Lesnar trusted to do his talking, his negotiating, his politics. When Heyman betrayed him, Lesnar didn't react with anger. He reacted with coldness. He beat Reigns when he could. He left when he needed to. But the emotional damage was done. And SummerSlam wasn't revenge on Roman the wrestler. It was revenge on Roman the thief. The thief who took Heyman, took the main event slot, took the championship aura Brock once owned. The Tribal Chief era didn't just eclipse the Beast incarnate, it replaced him. So, when Seth Rollins came knocking, Brock didn't see an enemy. He saw an opening. The third reason, the deepest reason, is also the simplest: Brock Lesnar wants to end the era he didn't start. The bloodline story, the Roman Reigns legacy, the Samoan dynasty, it all happened without him. For 3 years, Lesnar has watched WWE evolve past him. No longer the centerpiece. No longer the biggest draw. Cody Rhodes. Gunther. Solo Sikoa. Jey Uso. Even Logan Paul. The business changed. And Lesnar, always a storm waiting to strike, wanted back in. But not as a challenger. As a disruptor. By joining Rollins, he's not seeking a title. He's seeking impact. Because if you want to tear down a dynasty, you don't come in swinging wildly. You burn the foundation. And Brock Lesnar knew there was only one way to do it: from the inside, on his terms, without warning. When he F5'd Roman, it wasn't for cheers. It wasn't to reinsert himself into the title picture. It was to destroy Roman's invincibility. To prove that after 1,000 days on top, the Tribal Chief could still be brought down in under a minute. That's what Brock Lesnar does. He ends things. Not with speeches. Not with slow builds. With impact. And this time, the impact wasn't measured in broken tables or championship wins. It was measured in silence. In the stillness of Paul Heyman. In the shock on Reigns' face. In the hand he raised, the hand of the man he once despised. Seth Rollins. And maybe that's the part people can't understand. Why would Lesnar align with a man he once tried to break in half? Because Brock Lesnar doesn't do friendship. He does opportunity. And Rollins had the vision. The plan. The nerve. The nerve to ask the Beast not to destroy, but to rebuild. Together, they're not a tag team. They're not a faction in the traditional sense. They're a storm. One Rollins is directing. One Lesnar is fueling. One Roman Reigns can't stop. Not anymore. Brock Lesnar didn't switch sides. He ended the game. And he's playing a new one. Seth Rollins didn't stumble into power. He didn't get lucky. He didn't hitch a ride on someone else's momentum. What happened at SummerSlam 2025 was years in the making. A quiet storm building behind the flamboyant jackets and wild entrances. Behind every maniacal laugh and every stomp to the head was something fans missed: a long game. Because while Roman Reigns built his empire in plain sight, Seth Rollins was building something darker in the shadows. The formation of the Black Crown wasn't just a shocking twist. It was the final move in a game Rollins has been playing since the night he betrayed the Shield in 2014. That night made him It also marked the beginning of his descent. For years after the chair shot heard round the world, Rollins struggled to find clarity. He was champion. He was architect. He was a messiah. But he never got what Reigns got, undisputed authority. WWE never centered the product around him. He was always the workhorse. The company man. The bridge between eras. While Roman was given Heyman, the long title run, and the main event slot, Rollins was passed around, from face to heel to anti-hero and back again. It wore on him. But he never lost focus. Even during his feud with Cody. Even when fans sang his theme in arenas every week. Even when he played to the crowd, dressed like a neon hurricane. Underneath it all, the old Seth never left. The one who sees people as chess pieces. The one who knows that to lead in WWE, you don't just beat your enemies. You replace them. And that's exactly what he did at SummerSlam. Let's break it down. Rollins didn't attack Reigns after a title match just for shock value. He chose that moment because it was when Roman was at his most untouchable. After a clean win. At the top of his reign. He chose it because taking Reigns down after a match sends a clearer message than beating him in one. That message? I don't need to pin you to surpass you. And when he brought Brock Lesnar with him, he wasn't seeking backup. He was rewriting WWE hierarchy. He took Roman's greatest rival, the beast who once destroyed him, and made him an ally. That's psychological warfare. That's the Rollins edge. Because this isn't just about power, it's about symbolism. Reigns was the Shield's chosen one. Rollins was the traitor. The one who broke them. Now? Rollins is building a new brotherhood. Not with friends. Not with loyalty. But with force. He doesn't want family. He wants obedience. Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker aren't equals. They're soldiers. Lesnar isn't a partner. He's a weapon. And Rollins stands at the center of it, not smiling, not dancing, just watching. Watching it all fall into place. He's not hiding anymore. The flamboyance is gone. What's left is a man with nothing left to prove, only things to take. And he's not hiding his ambition. On Raw, Rollins said it flat out, Roman wanted a table. I want a throne. He didn't betray Roman. He outgrew him. He watched Reigns cling to power through bloodlines, family, tradition. And then he shattered all of it with a steel chair and one stomp. Because that's who Seth Rollins has always been. Not a hero. Not a villain. A designer of chaos. And for the first time in years, he's not reacting to someone else's story. He's writing his own. Roman Reigns didn't lose a match at SummerSlam 2025. He won. He stood victorious, belt in hand, war-torn but still champion. And yet, in that same ring, less than 2 minutes later, his reign collapsed, not with a pinfall, not with a submission, but with silence, betrayal, and a steel chair to the spine. What makes this fall so devastating isn't the violence. It's the meaning behind it. Because for nearly 4 years, Roman Reigns wasn't just a WWE champion. He was the standard. He turned heel in 2020 and became the tribal chief, a persona that redefined his career and reshaped the entire company. With Paul Heyman at his side and the bloodline behind him, Reigns elevated SmackDown, dominated pay-per-views, and brought back the aura of a top champion that hadn't existed since the prime of John Cena. But every empire falls. And Roman's didn't fall in a blaze of glory. It collapsed from within. Let's start with the psychology. Reigns built his run on 3 principles: dominance, family, and fear. He dominated opponents with a cold, calculating style. He surrounded himself with loyal family members, the Usos, Solo Sikoa, even Heyman. And he ruled through intimidation, both in kayfabe and in backstage perception. But those pillars began to crack. First, the Usos turned. Jay rebelled. Jimmy followed. The twins fractured and eventually faded. Then Solo Sikoa, Reigns' enforcer, began to show signs of autonomy. Quiet moments during matches where he wouldn't interfere. Side glances. Missed saves. And finally, Heyman, his most loyal strategist, was visibly shaken even before SummerSlam. Something was off. Still, Reigns believed in the aura. He believed the championship would protect him. That no matter what happened, the tribal chief couldn't be touched. And that's why the betrayal hit so hard. Because it proved that Roman Reigns isn't untouchable. He's vulnerable. And not just physically. Narratively. This wasn't just a sneak attack. This was a referendum on the entire Bloodline saga. Brock Lesnar didn't hit an F5 for a pop. Seth Rollins didn't stomp Reigns to start a feud. They did it to symbolically end the era. It wasn't about winning a title. It was about taking back the spotlight. And Roman knew it the moment he saw Lesnar's face. He didn't flinch because he was brave. He flinched because he realized too late that the Empire was gone. There was no Bloodline to save him. No Heyman to orchestrate a counter. No Usos. No Solo. No plan. Just a tired champion, standing alone in the middle of the ring. So where does Roman Reigns go from here? That's the question WWE wants us all to ask, and it's the most compelling one in the business right now. Because Roman's story has always been about control. Now he has none. And that opens the door to a version of Reigns we haven't seen in years, a man who has to fight from underneath. The last time Roman was truly an underdog was before 2020. Before he turned. Before Heyman. Back when fans rejected him. Back when he was being pushed as a hero he couldn't convincingly play. This could be the moment that brings that version back, but stronger. Smarter. Angrier. Or, this could be the moment he breaks. Because for the first time in years, Roman's mythology has been pierced. Fans no longer see him as unbeatable. He was left laid out. He was exposed. And while the title remains around his waist, it's hanging by a thread. There's no bloodline. No security. Just challengers circling and the black crown growing stronger by the week. And here's the deeper fear, what if Roman Reigns isn't ready to fight from the bottom? What if the years at the top have made him too comfortable? Too insulated? Too dependent on Heyman and others to carry the weight of strategy? Because when you build an empire on loyalty, and all your soldiers leave, what's left? A king with no army. And if Roman wants to survive what's coming, he can't just fight harder. He has to reinvent himself. Again. The invincible tribal chief is gone. What's left is a man who's been humiliated, exposed, and betrayed. And that might be the most interesting version of Roman Reigns we've ever seen. But only if he can survive the next attack.